like the Pedestrian Action Network or Living Streets Aotearoa. Andy Smith is the president of Living Streets Aotearoa. Good afternoon, Andy.
Good afternoon. A lovely day it is too. Great day for a walk.
A great Your main objection to the scooters, your main concern?
Main concern was lots of things. They came in under the Code of Compliance on street trading, so that's a bit weird, that law. NZTA put them in the 2004 rules change for low-powered vehicles, so they're allowed to be on the footpath because they're small wheels. But what's the value statement? Who wins from having these Lime scooters? It's really Lime because the people are stop walking and they don't have the benefits of walking. They're scooting. So we're actually giving up our footpaths so Lime can make money. Maybe we get a little bit of enjoyment out of them. I've seen children playing on these things.
Yeah.
And have you seen a brake on those Lime scooters? You need a very big hand to actually get around that brake. So people are not using the brakes effectively because that's all there is. It's not like the back wheel brake you have on the other kick scooters.
No, that's right. It feels a bit different. It does.
Yeah.
Presumably all the scooter workshops in the world, because Lime's going to run scooter workshops, and all the safety signs, Andy, won't stop people beetling along on them with the wind in their hair, because that's the whole point, isn't it? So
yeah,
can you see them coexisting long term?
Speed is a thing that separates walkers from everything else. Walkers and runners, do 5 to 8k an hour. Cyclists, skateboarders, mobility scooters, they all do up to 25k or more. And they're all allowed on the footpath, except cyclists. So I suggest separation by speed. If anything goes more than 8k or 10k, they should be somewhere else, on a cycleway, on a road. And it's fine if they're scootling along, but it's all about perceived safety. The people over the age of 60 are vulnerable. People over the age of 80 are vulnerable. One fall breaks a hip, that could be a death sentence. And it's those people that fear the idea that their footpaths, which they perceive to be safe for the last 80 years, are suddenly becoming a place where they could be endangered.
Yeah, I take your point. It's all very well to say it's delightfully disruptive, but you're leaving a section of society behind.
Yeah.
Okay, again, the question then, why not let the e-scooters use the cycle lanes? Because Dunedin and Wellington, for example, where they'll be going into, have spent a lot of money designing and redesigning cycle lanes. Why not yet let them use those lanes, do you think?
Yep, they're allowed in separated cycleways. I've read the rules, but they're not allowed in the painted ones, the green stripes that are just on the road. So, yeah, I think they should be mixing in with things the same speed. So they should be able to use cycleways, roads, and shared paths if they're wide enough. And have they got bells? No, they haven't, have they? Or at least cyclists have got bells and they can warn you that they're coming behind you.
Yes.
On the shared path, which is very polite and nice,
All right. Thank you for your input on that. And by the way, just quickly, have you actually been consulted?
Yes.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. Well, we've been trying to get a meeting with Catherine King. I'm actually writing a position paper for the International Federation of Pedestrians.
All right. I got to go. But thank you very much. Andy Smith on the panel. I just noticed the clock ticking furiously. Mark Knopf-Thomas, thank you for your company today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And Joe McCarroll.
Thank
always
you,
a pleasure.
Jim.
And we are back tomorrow. And Checkpoint follows.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the mother of a miner killed in the Pike River explosions says she's appalled and embarrassed that millions of dollars will be spent digging up her son's grave. Marion Curtin, whose son Richard is buried in the mine, believes politics has got in the way of a sensible decision, and the mission to re-enter Pike River will achieve nothing worthwhile. She talks to Checkpoint. It's utter calamity at a Christchurch District Court hearing when gang associates dive across the lawyer's bench and try and grab the guy in the dock. The defendant's lawyer says it's proof industrial action by court staff is putting people in danger. And the snag at the fundraising barbecue, over or under with the onions.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Law Society is warning industrial action by court staff is making courts unsafe. It says a brawl at the Christchurch District Court today, in which 3 men rushed a man in the dock, would not have happened if the defendant had been able to appear by video link. It says due to the industrial action, video links are no longer possible, so defendants have to appear in court in person. The Society's president, Catherine Beck, says today's case, which involved gang links, would normally have qualified for a video link.
What I'm told by the lawyer involved for the defendant is that it was very scary. It was upsetting for everybody involved. Obviously, the person that was being attacked, but the judge and other people within the courtroom. It was a very concerning event.
Catherine Beck is urging PSA members and the Ministry of Justice to consider the serious impact their dispute is having and to come to a resolution. More than 2,000 PSA members are working to rule and periodically walking off the job. 2 adults and a child were trapped in a car under power lines in Christchurch this afternoon. Fire and Emergency says the trio had to stay put while the power lines were taken off their vehicle. A truck carrying a crane hit a power pole, bringing the overhead lines down on the car about 20 to 4 on Kahu Road in the suburb of Riccarton. They were able to drive away after the power lines were removed. Not all families affected by the Pike River tragedy are celebrating yesterday's announcement about a re-entry. Christchurch resident Marion Curtin lost her son in the disaster and says she's deeply disappointed that the recovery plan is going ahead. Katie Todd reports.
Ms. Curtin's son, Richard Holling, was one of 29 men killed in Pike River Mine in 2010. She was told yesterday that a re-entry will be attempted to recover the bodies of those who died and search for clues as to why the mine exploded. The operation will cost $36 million and has been hailed as a victory by some of the families of the men who died. But Ms. Curtin says it is sacrilege to go fossicking for remains without knowing what is inside the mine. She says people wrongly assume that all the families affected by the tragedy are in favour of a re-entry. The operation will begin in February next year. Kei o tō tahi ko Katie Todd tēnei.
New Zealand's objections to being hit by United States steel and aluminium tariffs have received a polite hearing, but no suggestion they'll be removed anytime soon. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she raised the issue with the US Vice President Mike Pence at a dinner for regional leaders at a summit in Singapore. She says Mr Pence took on board New Zealand's complaints and there'll be further talks on the matter. Ms Ardern says she also pressed border trade ties.
For me, it's all about taking those opportunities to raise the issue, put the case on behalf of New Zealand, but actually to talk about the wider trade proposition. It's not just obviously about whether or not there's a tariff in place on specific products, but what benefit could be derived by increasing our trading relationship with the United States.
Jacinda Ardern is meeting Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Malaysia's veteran leader Mahathir Mohamad today. The Mayor of New Plymouth admits a council bungle means its revised freedom camping bylaw has been sent back to the drawing board. And in the meantime, a temporary ban has expired and now freedom camping, including without on-board toilets, is again permitted in all but a handful of locations. During the submissions process for the new bylaw, a local resident spotted it didn't reference the Reserves Act or the Coastal Reserves Management Plan, which already ban camping on reserves. Neil Holdham says it's a fair cop.
Yeah, look, I mean, they've made a mistake. Is it acceptable? Well, I think I certainly am not really interested in a blame culture. I think the key thing is that we've learned from it.
Neil Holdham says council staff are due to report back to an extraordinary meeting of the council on November the 29th, and he's confident they'll have a legally compliant solution. School principals warn that some overseas teachers recruited because of the teacher shortage will not cope with New Zealand classrooms. More than 3,000 overseas teachers have responded to an Education Ministry recruitment campaign, and 550 have been approved to seek work here. Principals say it's good to have a bigger pool of teachers, but foreign-trained teachers sometimes struggle with the New Zealand style of education. They also warn that overseas teachers are not familiar with Māori or Pasifika cultures. The ministry says everyone needs to work on cultural competence, but overseas recruits will get training. It's 5 minutes past 5. To sport, the All Blacks have made just one injury-enforced change to the team to face Ireland in Dublin this weekend. Sonny Bill Williams is out with a shoulder injury he picked up in last week's win over England, meaning Ryan Crotty starts at second five with Anton Leonard-Brown coming onto the bench. Coach Steve Hansen says Crotty is often underrated and is primed for a big game against the Six Nations champions.
He's going back into probably the position that suits him best. He's a good talker. He could easily be described as steady Eddie, but he's better than that. He's got attacking ability, he's got pace, one of the leaders, and hence why we play him at centre at times, because we want him on the park.
Steve Hansen. The Blues have demoted Tana Umanga to assistant coach, promoting another former All Black, Leon McDonald, to the head coaching role. Umanga will become the defence coach, with the Blues and New Zealand Rugby believing McDonald has a better chance of breathing life into the struggling Super Rugby side. Umanga concedes it wasn't his decision to step down, but says it's in the best interests of the team.
In the end, it wasn't my final decision. Yet I'm thankful and fortunate that, as I said, the board, New Zealand Rugby, and also obviously Leon saw there as a positive to keep me on board.
Tana Umanga. The former women's tennis world number 2, Agnieszka Radwanska, has announced her retirement from the sport. She won 20 professional titles in her 13-year career, with a runner-up finish at Wimbledon, her best result at a Grand Slam. That's the news.
The Christmas toy craze begins.
No molting, no worries, and he doesn't have to be walked every day. So yeah, the goodness of a pet without a real pet.
Crisis talks over a Brexit compromise.
No one should get the impression that people are saying, yeah, brilliant, well done, Theresa.
And the Women's Rugby World Cup heads for New Zealand.
Yeah, no, we're wrapped. Fantastic news for our country again, and fantastic news for the Bombers game.
Kick off your day with Morning Report from 6 till 9 with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Aspinall.
Then on 9 to noon, architect and urban planner Tim Stonor on the science behind creating towns and communities from scratch. And after 10, British horticultural historian and novelist Jennifer Potter on the maidens sent to Virginia to marry planters in the new book The Jamestown Brides. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine, however 1 or 2 light showers possible. Waikato to Whanganui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Cloudy periods, isolated afternoon and evening showers inland. Manawatu to Wellington, mainly fine, areas of morning cloud and night. Areas of cloud morning and night, I should say. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine, apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Bulla and Westland, fine, a few showers tomorrow, turning to rain in Westland in the afternoon. Canterbury and Otago, fine, apart from areas of morning and evening low cloud. Rain spreading north tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, patchy drizzle in Fiordland, turning to rain this evening. Rain spreading to Southland tomorrow morning with heavy falls possible. Rain then easing to showers in the evening. And the Chatham Islands mainly fine. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Coming up on Checkpoint, who will collect forensic evidence inside the Pike River drift if the police won't go underground? British Prime Minister Theresa May wins the backing of her cabinet for a draft Brexit deal. And Shane Jones promises to empty the $3 billion Provincial Growth Fund before the next election. And we'd love to hear what you think of onions. Should they be banned from Bunnings sausage sizzle? But we begin tonight with Richard Holling. The 41-year-old had worked at the Pike River mine for just 3 months when he and 28 others died nearly 8 years ago. Marion Curtin is Richard's mother. You probably haven't heard her name much because she rarely speaks publicly. But a short time ago, she told me that she was against re-entry and was floored by yesterday's announcement.
I couldn't believe that common sense or even sanity wouldn't prevail and it would be stopped and no more would happen. I was very, very upset.
Why?
Several reasons, in no particular order. One is the cost. I think I'm embarrassed as the mother of a boy who died, even though I've been anti-re-entry from the beginning. I still feel that these millions of dollars are going to be spent on behalf of some of the Pike families. I think just look at New Zealand today and you could make a list of 100 ways millions could be better spent, and I'm just appalled by that. Spend it on the living. The dead are dead. They're not forgotten. They're loved in our hearts. And mainly the cost, but also for me it's the futility of the whole exercise. I don't know what evidence they expect to find in the drift. If somebody could have ever explained that to me, I accept if something's explained to me and I understand it, but I've only ever heard vague references, really. Oh, we might find something. We might find the cause. Well, my way of thinking is that the mine exploded, and why people are surprised that a coal mine explodes, I just don't understand that. That is what coal mines often do. They always have, they always will. So, to find a cause to me is irrelevant. It did explode. And another point for me is sacrilege. I just feel it's inappropriate. Not that I understand there are any bodies to find, and they won't be bodies, they'll only be remains in the drift. But for me, the thought of poking around and picking up a little bag of ash and giving it to someone is just abhorrent. I believe in rest and peace. They're in a beautiful part of the country. It's you talk about scattering ashes in places of beauty, and to me, in a roundabout way, that is what has happened.
Do you think they're disturbing your son's grave, Marion?
Well, I do see it like that. I mean, not just mine, but 29 men. And yes, I just feel it's sacrilege.
Do other families agree with you, Marion, about this?
I do know that other families don't want re-entry. I know that. I can't give you a list of names but through various ways we hear. And for reasons of their own, I do know that some families choose not to speak up. And, things have become unpleasant at times for some people.
What do you mean by that?
I live in Christchurch, so I'm at a distance. But I have heard that, there's a bit of, questioning people's attitudes, perhaps.
So are you or some of the other families who feel the same way as you, are you at odds with some of the other Pike River families?
I don't know any of the other families. I mean, obviously we have different views. I don't want to make it sound as though there's a feud going on. We just have different views and different opinions. But I do know of one family that moved away from Westland just because they felt they needed to, for their own peace of mind, and I can understand that. But what I'm saying is we do know that there are other families, not everybody wants re-entry.
Marion, if there is even the tiniest chance that this exercise will uncover exactly what happened, are you not curious to know?
No, not at all. Couldn't care less. To me, I shouldn't say it like that, sorry, but it's irrelevant. I mean, it's happened. As I said, it was an explosion in a coal mine. I'm not an expert on coal mines, believe it or not, but I just think, well, if, and that's a big if, somebody in the mine that day did something silly that caused a spark, that caused an explosion, well, they've paid for it with their life, haven't they? So what else are you going to do? And this is it. Nobody knows the cause of the explosion, so how can anybody be held blameworthy? These are things I just don't understand, and I don't go blindly wanting to blame somebody and seek retribution. I just don't, I don't work like that. I just think it was a horrible, horrible tragedy.
Marion, did your son Richard ever talk about feeling unsafe in the mine?
No, he'd only just started there. He didn't have much experience. But what he had said to us was that, going back to what I said before, he had said when he died he wanted his ashes scattered in the Paparoa Ranges, so there's a certain sense of irony there. But, you know, no, I apart from the fact I don't understand how they can find out what happened.
So why do you
me,
think it's going ahead? You know, you say you'd rather money was spent elsewhere. You're not sure if they're going to find what some people are looking for. So what do you think's driving this re-entry plan?
Well, you'd have to ask the people who are driving it, wouldn't you? I personally don't understand it. You know, we as a family have chosen, you know, we think of Richard with love each day. And I've said it before, for me a good day is when I don't see or hear or read anything about Pike River. We just think that we had our lovely boy for 41 years, and we're thankful for that. And we remember him with love.
Marion Curtin, the mother of Pike River miner Richard Holling. 3 years and $3 billion, Shane Jones has vowed to make the most of the Provincial Growth Fund during an announcement in Fielding today. The Regional Economic Development Minister committed more than $80 million to regional projects during an event at Manfield Park. They include a rail hub in Palmerston North, improvements to rural internet and a new aviation school in Wanganui. And as Ben Strang reports, Mr Jones promises that come next election there won't be a single cent left.
Shane Jones arrived in Fielding this morning with his chequebook open. The minister in charge of the Provincial Growth Fund dished out $40 million for a freight hub in Palmerston North, another $40 million to improve regional internet speeds and connectivity, and boosted several other smaller projects in the Manawatu-Whanganui region. He's got a $3 billion kitty to play with, and make no mistake, he plans to spend it before the next election.
I do get criticised occasionally for having too much ambition and eagerness, but you know, when you're a politician, you get a 3-year posting. And then when you fail or flourish after those 3 years, it's too late to engage in a session of wailing, what if, could I have, should I have? I'll make you one promise, by the time the 3 years is over, there won't be 1 cent of the $3 billion fund looking for a home.
One of the projects Mr Jones has committed money to is a national commercial driver program based in Fielding. Nearly $3 million will go towards training up to 700 drivers each year in the expanded driver training centre at Manfield Park. Jada Barbarich is a student at Queen Elizabeth College in Palmerston North and says the course has already changed her life.
Over the last 2 years, I have been with some amazing people who have given me great one-on-one. They have taught me everything I needed to know about roads and licenses and all that fun stuff, and actually opens up so many opportunities, like I got a full-time job.
Jada's excited to see how Manawatu might flourish with millions being pumped into the region.
I really like that they're focusing on us, especially since Palmy's like this little hole of comfort, you know, you get stuck in it and then it's really difficult to find your way out of there. Now they're just focusing on us, which is this huge difference, because now we're getting everything we need to get done, but we can do that within a home radius.
In dishing out $40 million to Kiwi Rail, Shane Jones says thousands of people could benefit through new jobs, and not just in Manawatu. But he was quick to urge the company to do more in the regions.
Kiwi Rail needs to do a lot more heavy lifting in provincial New Zealand. We need to see more logs on Kiwi Rail assets out of Wairarapa. We need to see more freight on Kiwi Rail and mediated through hubs like we're seeking to create here.
It was a message Kiwi Rail's acting chief executive Todd Moyle appeared to take on board.
Thanks, Minister, for your understanding of the benefit that rail will provide in providing those stronger connections that we see, particularly into the rural areas and other communities. And I think that will ultimately drive a better New Zealand as a result of that.
Shane Jones also committed $400,000 to an aviation school in Whanganui and smaller amounts to education and tourism projects in Tararua, Manawatu and Horowhenua. For Checkpoint, Ben Strang tēnei.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has won the backing of her cabinet for a draft divorce deal from the European Union, but her Brexit battles are far from over. More than 2 years after the UK voted to leave the EU, Mrs May said the cabinet had a long, detailed and impassioned debate, I think that's code for a ding-dong row behind closed doors, about an agreement that she describes as the best that could be negotiated. But she now faces a huge battle to get Parliament to agree to the draft. Foreign editor Graham Acton reports.
After a marathon 5-hour meeting, Theresa May emerged from Downing Street to announce the decision.
The Cabinet has just had a long, detailed and impassioned debate on the draft withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration on our future relationship with the European Union. The choices before us were difficult, particularly in relation to the Northern Ireland backstop. But the collective decision of Cabinet was that the government should agree the draft withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration. This is a decisive step which enables us to move on and finalise the deal in the days ahead. These decisions were not taken lightly, but I believe it is a decision that is firmly in the national interest.
But while the Cabinet said they had reached a collective agreement, they are far from speaking with one voice. Chief Brexiteer MP Jacob Rees-Mogg is among those who've always questioned Theresa May's strategy towards Brexit, and he says this draft document does not actually remove the UK from the clutches of the EU.
I think this is a major problem for the government because it destroys trust. The Prime Minister made some very clear promises in her various speeches, but perhaps most importantly in the Conservative Party manifesto. One of those was we were leaving the customs union. In this arrangement, we can only leave the customs union with the permission of the European Union, which is a worse situation than we're currently in.
Mr Rees-Mogg is likely among those Tory MPs now discussing the possibility of forcing a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Whether or not Theresa May faces that threat or stares it down, she still faces the uphill task of getting the agreement through the House of Commons. She met Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn privately a few hours ago, but after the announcement a draft deal had been agreed, he was making it clear he won't be throwing the Prime Minister a lifeline.
I don't believe that the deal that I've heard of so far is in the national interest. It doesn't meet the needs of all parts of Britain. It doesn't give us a security of our trading relationship with Europe in the future through a permanent customs union in which we have a say.
One of the central stumbling blocks over the last year of fraught negotiations has been the question of Northern Ireland and its border with the Republic of Ireland. The draft agreement suggests Northern Ireland may have to continue following EU trade rules after Brexit, a possibility that's angered the DUP, the Northern Irish party that gives Theresa May her majority in Parliament. The DUP's Sammy Wilson says the draft deal is a bad one.
Why would a Prime Minister wish to sell a deal to the House of Commons, which keeps us tied into the customs union, which keeps us tied to EU regulations, which doesn't allow us to break free of those except by the permission of a body outside the United Kingdom. And for that, we pay £39 billion. I mean, I think that people will be appalled at this deal.
Theresa May continues to defy the political pundits in the UK, first surviving the loss of her Conservative majority in Parliament and now reaching a deal with the EU that hasn't been rejected by her cabinet. But over the next few weeks, she'll need all the political survival skills she can muster. For Checkpoint, Graham Acton.
A Christchurch defence lawyer whose client was rushed by gang associates during a court appearance this morning thinks industrial action by court staff is putting people in danger. Daniel French was pleading guilty to firearms and cannabis charges when the men who have a beef with him over the death of another gang member bolted over a barrier and tried to attack him. His lawyer Liz Bulger had anticipated trouble, but here's the thing, the court staff are locked in a pay dispute with the Ministry of Justice, so they've withdrawn some services, and that meant that her client was not able to appear by video link. Instead, he had to be there in person. Liz Bulger picks up the story.
The defendant was in the dock, and I was in the process of dealing with his appearance, including dealing with bail issue and name suppression, etc. And then all of a sudden behind me there was a bit of a commotion, and next thing 2 or 3, seemed like more at the time, people came over council's bench and made their way towards the dock. One of them got on top of the glass partition. I didn't see whether he made contact with the defendant. A couple of others were brought to the ground before they got to the dock. So 3 arrests made, 3 appearances in court this afternoon, and 2 of them ended up with 3 months imprisonment for contempt, which is the maximum.
So basically they were going for your client?
Yeah. That's certainly how it looked to me.
Liz, did you feel unsafe?
Well, I think one of the things it did do was expose to all of us how unsafe the new courthouse is. I've always thought it's unsafe because the public are very close behind lawyers and other people in the body of the court, and it was a pretty short distance between the people who were sitting in the front row and the dock.
Did they have to clamour over anything? Was there any physical barrier stopping them getting to you?
Well, there's a bar between the front of the public gallery and the backs of the lawyers who are sitting in the back row, which is where I was sitting. I suppose a tall person could just about step over it, but there's no other barriers. And I understand, I didn't see it, but I understand that one of the people actually leapt over the bench that I was sitting at next to me, missing me by a narrow margin, but I wasn't conscious of that at the time. I've only been told that since.
Were these gang members?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So how did you end up with this situation?
Well, my client was always going to appear in person because there were pleas to be entered today, and so I wanted him to appear. But when it became apparent that there might be trouble, I wasn't able to request the court for an AVL appearance instead because of the industrial action which is going on at the moment.
So, Liz, to be clear, you would have applied for him to appear in court via a video link, so he wouldn't actually have to be physically present.
When I became aware that there could be trouble, that was my option. I could have done that. Except that the industrial action in place at the moment includes a ban on AVL appearances. So that application would not have been granted.
So in your view, is that industrial action now placing people in danger?
Well, it did this morning. The standoff, whatever's happening between the ministry and the staff, the situation was such that people were in danger. There were people who were in the back of the court who were completely unrelated to my client's appearance. There was a big police presence. There's no doubt about that because tensions have been running high in relation to this matter. But certainly this morning was the worst example of behaviour like that in a court that I've seen in 31 years in practice. And in sentencing one of the people this afternoon, Judge Saunders said it was the worst that he'd seen in his time on the bench. So that gives you a measure of what a bad situation it was. So in answer to your question, yes, I think people were in danger this morning. It could have gone very bad. But for the very quick actions of the police who were present and the court security staff, they were fantastic.
Do you have concerns that, well, there could be a repeat of this kind of scenario while this industrial action is on?
I guess if a similar situation arose, yeah, it definitely could be repeated in any court in the country. One of the people ended up face down on the ground in handcuffs, not that far from where the judge sits. It was a bad situation, and people were really shaken. There were some young lawyers who were in court with me this morning, and I have to confess I was quite shaken as well. Usually that sort of thing, you take in your stride, but no, today it wasn't pleasant for anybody, that's for sure.
So what needs to happen? Do the ministry and the union need to get together and sort themselves out?
Well, I think everybody involved in the court system right up to the Chief District Court Judge, is of the view that with the current disruptions, and maybe, this matter as well now in the mix, everybody would like to see a resolution, and sooner rather than later.
That is Christchurch defence lawyer Liz Bulger. And the Law Society agrees that the industrial action by court staff is making courts unsafe. It's urging PSA members and the Ministry of Justice to come to a resolution. But the PSA rejects the claims that the courts are being made unsafe by this industrial action. The union says if security was a concern in the Christchurch District Court today, then the judge could have cleared the court and prevented the public from being there. Coming up, Auckland and Whangarei win the rights to host the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2021. At least 50 people are now dead in California's wildfires, and it's being called Sausage Gate and Bananyoning. And it's got the Prime Ministers of two countries talking about it. Well, should onions be banned from sausage sizzles? We'd love to hear your feedback on all of that. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook, and our email is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But it is coming in thick and fast following our interview with Marion Curtin, the mother of Richard Holling, who died in the Pike River mine incident. She doesn't believe we should be going into the mine again. This person, good to hear from that mother. We in Christchurch have known that there won't be any bodies to recover. Leave them in peace, says Judith. And at last, a voice of reason on Pike. You cannot have miners doing forensics. That is a recipe for manufacturing evidence. Of what? And Rolls was a genuinely lovely guy, says Matthew. Thank you for your feedback, and hopefully we'll get to more of it shortly. But now it's time for the headlines.
The Law Society is warning the courts are becoming unsafe due to ongoing industrial action by Justice Ministry staff. It says a brawl at the Christchurch District Court today would not have happened if the defendant could have appeared by video link. The Society's president, Catherine Beck, says today's case involving gang links was not heard by video link due to the industrial action. The mother of a man who died in the Pike River tragedy is deeply disappointed the recovery plan is going ahead. Yesterday, the government announced it was spending $36 million in a bid to recover the bodies of the 29 men and find out what happened. Marion Curtin of Christchurch believes it's sacrilege to go looking for remains without knowing what is inside the mine. New Zealand's objections to United States steel and aluminium tariffs have been politely received, but there's no suggestion they'll be removed. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern raised the issue with the US Vice President Mike Pence at a dinner for regional leaders at the East Asia Summit in Singapore. She says there'll be further talks on the matter, and she also pressed for broader trade ties. The New Plymouth Mayor admits the council bungled its revised freedom camping bylaw, which means a temporary ban has expired. Residents fear a freedom camping free-for-all now that it is again permitted in most places. Neil Holdham says he's confident they'll have the ban back in place. 3 people were trapped in a car under power lines in the Christchurch suburb of Riccarton this afternoon. It happened after a truck carrying a crane hit a power pole, bringing the overhead lines down on the car. Fire and Emergency says the 3 people, including a child, were able to drive away after the power lines were removed. Millions of dollars will be pumped into Auckland and Whangarei to prepare to host the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2021. New Zealand won the rights to stage the tournament in a vote in Dublin this morning. Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai says they'll invest more than $3 million in the tournament. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Time for business now. Madison's just helping me decide whether I've drawn on my face with my pen. I haven't. I'm clear. I'm in the clear.
For those listening on radio, she's clear of ink on the face.
All right. Well, let's go to business now. Regulators have had another look into bank misconduct. What have they found?
This time it was just the Financial Markets Authority, and they were looking into specifically banking sales incentive structures for frontline staff. So that's things like mostly bonuses, commission, also competitions and prizes, all linked to making sales. Now, those are sales like home loans, credit cards, term deposits, even insurance, so life insurance, car insurance, and also investments like KiwiSaver. Now, there were 9 banks involved in this one, so they were the 9 major retail banks, including the top 5, your ANZ, ASB, Westpac, BNZ, Kiwibank, in that order, in fact. and what the FMA did find within this was that staff and managers are certainly too sales focused, so that actually puts them at odds with customers' interests when they are selling those types of products and services to them.
Meaning they're driven by their own financial gain rather than whether it's the best for the customer or not?
Exactly, and typically the size of that financial gain on average for salespeople at banks is about $6,000 that they kind of have available to them on average to make per year. But in one case, there was actually one top bank salesperson who earned $2,790 $1,000 in 1 year just in sales target. So that's how big it can get, and that costs across those 9 retail banks.
That's a big incentive to push.
Exactly, it's a lot of money for one person. Obviously, we didn't get too much detail about what bank that was. The FMA didn't give too much away there. I did interview the head of regulation at the Financial Markets Authority today, Liam Mason, and I asked him if banks had ever missold products in regards to trying to achieve those sales incentives. Here's what he said.
We've certainly seen some instances where that's occurred. It wasn't the purpose of this exercise to go into files and phone records and the rest and look at particular instances. We're looking at the settings. What we see is those settings drive a much higher risk of poor customer outcomes.
Why not go in and actually find out what this has resulted in for customers? Why play nice?
So we have looked at individual cases when they come up. The reason that we took this thematic approach was because this is an issue that we see affecting the entire industry, and it's one that's received already quite a bit of attention overseas. So this was a chance really to take stock of what's going on over here. Is it high risk? We think it is. Does it need to change? We think it does.
But you think banks already haven't gone far enough in putting these measures in place. So what makes you think that following this review, will you tell them to, I guess, just tighten up, that they will?
I think that the societal expectations, if you like, around what banks should be delivering for customers have changed, have risen over time. Banks are recognising that, and that's why we're seeing some changes already underway. We've given banks until March next year to come back and tell us how they're going to respond to our recommendations, and then we've said we're going to report on what we find there. So any bank that doesn't want to or decides not to implement these changes, they need to explain to us what's the case they can make that they can look after their customers.
That's Liam Mason, the head of regulation at the Financial Markets Authority that I interviewed today about their bank incentive structure report. I also went to the top 5 banks as well that all of their employees were interviewed by the FMA for this investigation, and I asked them, obviously what they thought, what sales incentives they did have for frontline staff. The Big 4 told me that they'd actually already got rid of them earlier this year, but obviously, as Liam mentioned there, they don't think banks have gone far enough with what they've already done. The only one out of the top 5 who hasn't is Kiwibank. So
really?
They're obviously state-owned, so it seems like the government is giving 2 sides of the story here. One regulator on one side telling all banks to get rid of our sales incentives, but then the state-owned bank hasn't done that. But I did speak to them today and they said, quote, "We are working on it."
Let's hear quickly what happened in the markets.
The NZX Top 50 index fell, hardly even worth mentioning, just 2 points, so that's 0.02%. So we're closing tonight at 8,825 points. The New Zealand dollar still definitely buying stronger, so that's buying at 67.8 US cents. This morning it was above 68 US cents. We haven't seen that since about July. We're buying at 93.5 to the Australian and 52.3 British pence.
Thank you, Madison. Let's turn now to the All Blacks. The All Blacks have made just one injury-enforced change to the team to face Ireland in Dublin on Sunday morning. Sonny Bill Williams, let's try that again, is out with a shoulder injury he picked up last week in the win over England, meaning that Ryan Crotty starts at second 5 with Anton Leonard-Brown coming onto the bench. It's the All Blacks' penultimate test of the end-of-year tour and pits the world's 2 top-ranked sides against each other. Joe Porter joins us now live from the Wellington studio. Hi, Joe. So Steve Hansen sticking with his strongest side. Why has he decided to do that?
Well, look, it's all part of this plan to build up towards next year's World Cup in Japan, where, of course, the All Blacks will be chasing their 3rd successive World Cup title. So in Japan against Australia, they treated that match against Australia like a crunch pool game they had to win, like replicating a World Cup tournament next year. Then, of course, they play Japan. That's like replicating an easy pool game. Then they go to England at Twickenham. It's like a semi-final, and this weekend is the final against Ireland, so to speak. So they're essentially trying to replicate their run through a World Cup like it would be next year, and having to win these 2 crunch knockout games in a row. England last week, Ireland this week, probably their 2 biggest contenders in next year's World Cup. So it essentially gives the All Blacks a dummy run at how they need to prepare, how they need to be, and that's why he's picked his strongest side possible to see if they can go on again, and after a big match last weekend, back that up against an Irish team who will be desperate to claim their first ever win over the All Blacks on home soil.
So do you think that the game against Ireland is going to be bigger than the one against England?
Bigger, maybe not the right words. Certainly 80,000 people at Twickenham and the fans singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot to drown out the haka. Maybe not quite so bigger, but as far as challenges go, Ireland are the better team. They're the Six Nations champion. They won the Grand Slam this year, beating all 5 other nations in the Six Nations, so England, Wales, Italy, Scotland, of course, as well. They've had a much better record in recent times against the All Blacks than the English, and they're very, very good at Lansdowne Road at home in Dublin. So they're certainly the form team of the Northern Hemisphere sides, and we all know they beat the All Blacks for the first time in Chicago in 2016 and almost did the same to them a few weeks later in Dublin. So it should be a really big challenge for an All Blacks team against an Irish team that's in good form and are well coached, well prepared, and have not had too many injury worries.
So do you think the All Blacks are vulnerable because it was such a narrow win at Twickenham?
Yeah, look, I think the Irish will be smelling a little bit of blood in the water around the All Blacks and their invincible aura. It's not there so much this year. They've leaked quite a few tries in defence this season, more than they have in the past. 20-odd tries, I think, which is much more than they have in the last 11 matches than they previously would have. So they've certainly defensively been a little bit vulnerable. Again, 1-point win over England last weekend. The All Blacks having to hold off at the very end and a late controversial refereeing decision allowing them to hold on to the win. So I think people sniff the All Blacks are a bit vulnerable, and that there's that little bit of element of invincibility has left their aura, and that they're certainly right for the picking. However, the All Blacks are favourites, they're the world #1s, and the Irish will need to produce a pristine performance to upset them in Dublin on Sunday.
So what would a win mean for the All Blacks then?
Well, look, it gives whoever wins a psychological edge going into next year's World Cup. It's officially or unofficially the battle for the world's top team, even though the All Blacks will still remain the #1 side regardless of the result. So whoever wins can claim the world's best title going into next year's World Cup year. They can also claim they've beaten all the top teams this year, which they have done. If Ireland beat the All Blacks, they've beaten everyone. So, and the All Blacks, of course, they need to beat Ireland so to make sure that their fans know they can combat this Northern Hemisphere style of game that they're a little bit unused to. It also gives them a psychological edge at the World Cup because these two teams could very likely meet in the quarterfinals or the semi-finals next year in Japan.
So, Joe, before you go, Tana Umaga has stepped down as the Blues coach.
Yeah, step down might be a sort of a relatively politically correct way to put it. I think he sort of jumped slightly before he was pushed. Look, he extended his contract in May through to the end of next year, but it wasn't a very good Super Rugby season for the Blues. It hasn't been for the past few seasons. But instead of, I guess, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, they've demoted Tana Umaga, and he's accepted that role to defence coach, promoting Leon McDonald, one of course, Umaga's former All Black teammates, to the head coach's role. So they obviously feel like McDonald can breathe some fresh life into the struggling Super Rugby side and give them the results they've been craving for so long. But they still feel like Umaga's a big part of their picture and a part of their culture and club. And luckily for them, Umaga has looked past the ego and past the pride and has decided to take the knock on the head and step down to the defences coach's role for the better of the team. So we'll see what happens there. Umaga still has hopes of coaching at the top level in the future, so we'll see what happens, but hopefully a better year for the Blues next year. But yeah, a little bit of a coup there, Leon McDonald usurping Tana Umaga.
Thank you, Joe. That is Joe Porter. Looking forward to the game there with the All Blacks in Ireland on Sunday. Now, let's stay with rugby. Several $1 million will be pumped into Auckland and Whangarei after they were awarded the rights to host the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2021. New Zealand won the rights to stage the 9th edition of the tournament, heading off Australia in a vote in Dublin this morning. It will be the first time the Women's World Cup has been in the Southern Hemisphere and will run for 6 weeks in July and August. 12 teams are set to take part in the tournament, which is expected to generate millions and attract thousands to the two cities. Katie Scotcher reports.
Kia ora everyone, we're in France and we've just heard the awesome news that we've won the bidding rights to host the Women's Rugby World Cup. Bring on 2021!
The Black Ferns celebrating the news the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup will be played on home turf. And they're not the only ones celebrating.
Isn't it just so exciting?
That's Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai. She says the Northland city will host 3 games and 2 quarter-finals during the tournament. The games will be played at the Northland Events Centre, which seats 17,500. Mayor Mai expects up to 6,000 people will flock to Whangarei for the games.
We'll be investing around a little more than $3 million, but as I say, a lot of that is work that's already planned. You know, things like buying a backup generator and a big screen, a stadium sound system. So they're the types of things that they're an investment and legacy things that will be in place for future bids for other events.
Mayor Mai is expecting the 5 games, held over 2 weeks, will bring in big money.
We were looking at a range of a total contribution to Whangarei's GDP of around 5.9 to 6.4 million.
The tournament is set to generate millions across Auckland too. Matches will be played at QBE Stadium in Albany, which seats 25,000, and Waitakere Stadium, which seats 5,000. The last Women's World Cup in Ireland last year boasted a record attendance of more than 45,000. The 60,000-seat Eden Park will be available for semis and the final, but whether or not it is used is yet to be decided. Auckland Tourism expects 4,500 people will visit the region, generating more than $3.5 million for the city. AT's Steve Armitage says Auckland Council will spend $750,000 on the event.
It's about the opportunity to showcase New Zealand to the world. The participating countries, once qualification is completed, are likely to touch many of our key markets from a tourism perspective. So it's a great opportunity for us to profile New Zealand through the tournament.
Former Blackfern and Labour MP Louisa Wall says the opportunity to host the Women's Rugby World Cup is long overdue. Ms Wall was a member of the Black Ferns when they became international champions for the first time in 1998. They've won the World Cup 4 times since and are the current reigning champions. She says despite the team's success, the cost of bringing international teams to New Zealand was a likely setback.
The quality of rugby that we're playing has now meant that there are investors, sponsors, governments who are willing to support New Zealand rugby to grow the game.
The women's game has skyrocketed in recent years in New Zealand. Women now make up 18% of rugby players. Hamilton Girls High School's first 15 are the reigning national secondary school rugby champions. Their principal, Mari Gordon, says the whole team aspires to be a Black Fern.
Because some of those ones that are 17, 18 who are coming out of school will certainly see that as a goal that they'd love to aspire to. So, yeah, I think they're really excited, but mainly because they get to see their team back here.
The Black Ferns captain, Fia'o Fama-Osili, says the team can't wait to showcase New Zealand women's rugby.
It's very special and it's a big deal. You know, we've got the most world champions in the world, you know, from girls since playing 1998 in the World Cup, and they're all at home, and how great is it to showcase them to the world and to meet so many world champions in the country. That in itself is pretty special.
And holding on to the cup will make it even more special. I Tamaki Makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher-aho.
High school students who want to avoid mountains of student debt are being urged to consider a career in the trades, where their earning potential could top their classmates heading off to university. A new study has found at age 30, plumbers, mechanics and flooring installers earn more than accountants, medical graduates and lawyers. Te Anua Hurahanganui reports.
At 29 years old, Elaine Pereira is living her dream. After 10 years in customer service, she recently became an apprentice mechanic. She earns $41,000 a year while training and has no student loan.
As I progressed through my study, at a certain level, my employer just would offer a pay rise. So the more that I learned about the trade, the more money I got. I've had 3 pay rises in in less than a year.
And there's more good news for Elaine. By the time she turns 30, she's likely to earn more money than an accountant. That's according to a new study by Auckland consultancy firm Scarlatti. It's spent the past 13 years using IRD records to track the average yearly income of a group of 19-year-olds who left school in 2003. By the age of 30, they found a mechanical engineer earned $180,000 more than an accountant, a plumber earned $20,000 more than a medical graduate, and a flooring installer earns $115,000 more than a lawyer. Industry Training Federation CEO Josh Williams says parents should be encouraging their kids to consider working in a trade.
We'd like the mums and dads of New Zealand to know that getting an apprenticeship straight out of school is a really good option. This isn't about saying university is bad. This is about saying that the rewards from undertaking work-based training and apprenticeships are very, very good.
But how good are they in the long term? Universities New Zealand Chief Executive Chris Whelan says university graduates end up earning more than those working in a trade later on in life.
What the report is saying is true, that yes, you are better off in the trades up until about age 30. What the report doesn't say is, of course, you're better off actually with a degree from about age 30 to about age 65.
He says that's especially true for medical graduates.
A typical medical graduate, they're going to be about 8 years in their studies. They're also the profession that is most likely to earn about $4.5 million more than just a straight school leaver over their entire working lives.
But Mr Williams says it's worth remembering tradies also earn earlier and earn while they're training. And without a massive student loan to pay back, he says that's a pretty good deal.
So one of the things the researchers point out is that even if you look at the graph where, those outcomes are reasonably similar, the apprentice doesn't have an average of $30,000 to pay back.
Ms Pereira says she didn't choose to be a mechanic for the money, but she says university isn't the only pathway where young people can earn money or find opportunities to grow.
There's so much opportunity to earn a lot of money in a trade. Being in a trade doesn't necessarily mean that you're stuck on the tools all the time. There's room for career development where you move on to become like site managers. It'd be silly not to even consider it.
And she says some people even choose to do both. Last year, over half of new industry trainees and apprentices already had a tertiary qualification and 24% already had degrees. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui, aho.
Residents in Central Hawke's Bay are outraged at the District Health Board's decision to close a small rural hospital over Christmas without consulting its staff or the community. The closure of the 9-bed ward at Central Hawke's Bay Health Centre will mean patients from Waipokoro and Waipawa will have to travel more than an hour to Hastings for after-hours or hospital treatment. It's prompted a group of Waipokoro GPs to write an open letter to the DHB asking them to keep the unit open. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley with the story.
Waipawa resident Pip Burm knows firsthand just how valuable the inpatient ward in Waipokoro is.
My mother actually, she broke her pelvis and we transferred her to the Waipokoro unit just so she was closer to home. And she actually passed away there. So I know the importance of having family members close.
So she was shocked to learn the ward will close for 2 weeks over Christmas.
I know the importance of having family close by, and not only for the family members outside of the hospital, but also for the family that are in hospital over Christmas. And it's so open. They're so accommodating in Central Hawke's Bay. You don't always have to stick to visiting hours as well. I mean, when my mother passed away, we were allowed to actually stay overnight. I had a 2-week-old baby, and she stayed with us as well. So, they made us feel like it was at home. And it's just so sad that they didn't even consult with anybody in Central Hawke's Bay before they actually made that decision.
Waipokoro GP Andreas Dunn is also disappointed and surprised at the lack of consultation.
We heard the decision was taken in July.
He's one of 4 GPs to write an open letter to the DHB in a local newspaper, expressing their disappointment at the decision. He says the elderly and those needing after-hours care will be most affected by the closure.
The primary health aspect here is totally neglected. We have people present after hours to the ward all the time with minor ailments, and they're being treated by the nurses in the ward, and us, of course, if necessary. And all this is going to fall away.
No one from Hawke's Bay DHB was available to comment today, but in a statement it says it often closes non-essential services at its hospital in Hastings during Christmas to allow staff to take leave. The Deputy Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay, Ian Sharp, who's also chairman of the Primary Health Services Liaison Group and therefore should have been told about the closure, says he was totally blindsided by the decision. And he's livid.
I can assure you, having spoken to the staff, it's one of the advantages of actually living in the community compared to the DHB who don't, is that the staff don't want to take holidays. In fact, they know they're an essential part, and to say it's a non-essential service, I think is a mistake as well.
The DHB says discussions with staff began last month and notes the ward was closed for a short time during the nurses' strike earlier this year, but the issue has clearly ruffled some feathers, and senior DHB managers, including the chief executive, will meet with Central Hawke's Bay councillors and community members tomorrow to discuss the issue. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Well, this is Checkpoint, and we leave no stone or barbecue unturned in the pursuit of a good story. This has been called Sausage Gate or bun onionings, and this one is very hard to say, so forgive me. Osage sizzle, as in osh, edge, sizzle. And it's got the Prime Ministers of two countries talking about it. This week, Bunnings announced it was issuing new guidelines to community groups running fundraising sausage sizzles at its stores. And it's become far more controversial than managers ever dreamed. Now, we sent Alex Perrottet and camera operator Rebecca Parsons-King to investigate what's caused such a fuss and ask the hard questions of Bunnings customers.
So here we go, we got the sausages sizzling away here, looks bad.
It's a case of the onion fun police dictating the order of something many people hold dear, the traditional sausage on a square piece of bread. What comes first, the onion or the sausage? Bunnings has produced this new sign to be laminated and stuck up at every sausage sizzle, and it makes it very clear, onions first, then the sausage. Why? To avoid onions slipping off the sausage and onto the floor, where apparently it becomes a safety hazard. Some Bunnings customers were already well aware of the new rules. Have you got a personal preference?
I think I'm a non-top guy. Yeah.
Do you see any problems, other problems, if you put the onions underneath the sausage?
Well, your structural integrity of your bread's compromised quite badly, so yeah.
Yeah, do you reckon they could even soak through and maybe spill even more?
It's a possibility. That would depend on your sauce ratio.
Ah, okay, that's important, isn't it? Some people have suggested that the sauce on top of the onions, on top of the sausage, could stick the onions to the sausage, so sauce could actually be helpful here, like a mortar.
Sure. Yep, I'd agree with that.
That's so silly. It just sounds silly. Like, really, you're going to fall over an onion, like one little onion. That's just what I think. So what, they have to be on the bottom now?
Well, they have to be between the bread and the sausage. Do you see any problems with that?
No. No. I felt like my onions never fell off.
Waste of time, but hey, whatever floats your boat, hey? I mean, it's health and safety gone wrong. But hey, that's what it is nowadays.
Have you ever seen a hazard with an onion slipping off a sausage?
I've done heaps of them at the school and never had any problems. So, I think it's a bit silly, but over the top, but that's what it is. It's the PC world, isn't it?
It's a very dangerous time for us all. Don't know what we're going to do. Those onions, man.
I don't think that's a problem. People should look where they're going, and it's only a tiny little bit of space, isn't it? It's not like they're going to go all over the car park, are they? Well, they might. That could be the problem.
And the dispute has even spread overseas to Singapore, where Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and her Australian counterpart Scott Morrison are attending the ASEAN meeting.
I think we should make a commitment, a joint commitment, that on our watches the Bunnings sausage sizzle shall continue.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Onions on top or underneath, however you like.
Bunnings says it didn't intend to cause such a reaction, but no doubt they're happy with the attention the new serving suggestion has garnered. They didn't confirm the source of the matter was an elderly man who slipped on an onion in Queensland, but we went to our own sausage statesman, the Mad Butcher, for his advice.
Well, I don't have onions. When I have a sausage on a bit of bread and butter, I just have a sausage. But everyone's got their own taste, and that's just one man's opinion. A good sausage doesn't need onions.
But if you do like your sausage with some onions, just be ready and look out for the signs as well as any stray onions next time you're lining up at the barbecue.
Oh yeah, mate. Onions always under the sausage.
And why is that?
Oh, so you don't slip on them when they fall out.
Good on you. Thank you. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And just to hand, we have some fresh information from ACC here. In the last 5 years, there have been 25 sausage sizzle related injuries. And although not mutually exclusive, there were 21 ACC claims relating to slipping on onions since 2013. I kid you not, 21 ACC claims. If you're feeding on sausages or onions this evening, feel free to get in touch with your feedback on that story. We really want to know on the text 2101. And we have this email in. Dear Checkpoint, New Zealand is definitely becoming a nanny sausage state if it needs to legislate over onions spilled onto the ground causing potential grievous bodily harm, this person says. Surely the act of spilling slippery slivers of onion is one of poor catering skills, poor service or wrapping or clumsy, hungry customers. That a sign could fix by saying do not consume within 50 metres of this table, or $50 fine if you spill a single onion ring. Each town could simply create a new role for police officers for sausage spills and thrills. Thank you for that. Turning to a more serious matter, earlier in the show we spoke to Marion Curtin, the mother of Richard Holling, who died in the Pike River explosion. She is appalled that there is a re-entry going ahead and the cost of that. This feedback, thank God someone is speaking some sense, this person says. Wonderful, brave, sensible woman.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. A Christchurch defence lawyer whose client was rushed in the courtroom says industrial action by court staff is putting people in danger. Daniel French was pleading guilty to firearms and cannabis charges today when 3 men jumped over a bench and tried to attack him. The men appeared to have a beef with him over the death of a gangmate. His lawyer, Liz Bulger, told Checkpoint tensions have been running high in relation to her client's case.
People were in danger. There were people who were in the back of the court who were completely unrelated to my client's appearance. There was a big police presence, there's no doubt about that. Certainly this morning was the worst example of behaviour like that in a court that I've seen in 31 years in practice.
Christchurch defence lawyer Liz Bulger. More than 2,000 PSA members are working to rule and periodically walking off the job in a pay dispute with the Justice Ministry. Not all families affected by the Pike River tragedy are celebrating yesterday's announcement about a re-entry. Christchurch resident Marion Curtin lost her son Richard Holling in the 2010 disaster. She says she's deeply disappointed that the recovery plan is going ahead. She was told yesterday that a re-entry will be attempted to recover the bodies of those who died and search for clues as to why the mine exploded. The operation will cost $36 million and has been hailed as a victory by some of the families of the men who died.
For me, the thought of poking around and picking up a little bag of ash and giving it to someone is just abhorrent. I believe in rest in peace. They're in a beautiful part of the country. You know, it's you talk about scattering ashes in places of beauty, and to me, in a roundabout way, that is what has happened.
Marion Curtin. The police are trying to find the truck driver who drove off after catching power lines that fell and trapped 2 adults and a baby in a car. Emergency services had to block off Kahu Road in the Christchurch suburb of Riccarton this afternoon while the lines were lifted off the vehicle. No one was injured. Fire and emergency spokesperson Peter McGrail says the police are now trying to find the truck driver.
He didn't stop. He's continued on, so nobody knows who the truck was. Police are looking into that with their street cameras and other methods to find out who did it.
Peter McGrail says the truck had a crane or possibly a digger on the back. New Zealand visitors and businesses will get improved access to Singapore under an upgraded free trade deal with the island state. The two countries have unveiled an update for the 18-year-old trade agreement at a meeting between Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Singapore leader Lee Hsien Loong at the East Asia Summit in Singapore. New Zealanders will now get 3 months visa-free entry compared with the previous 1 month, and New Zealand companies with offices in Singapore will also be able to send staff to work there longer. Two-way trade and investment was worth about $10 billion in the past year. Further agreements are expected next year, covering science, education, arts and defence. National is attacking the government over an extension to the review into Czech drug smuggler Karel Shrubek's residency. Immigration New Zealand has given Shrubek's lawyer 2 extra days to respond to the document, moving the deadline out to Friday next week. It pushes the review out to almost a month. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, has been under intense political pressure over his decision not to deport Shrewbeck and has ordered a review. An Immigration New Zealand spokesperson says the extension is an operational decision and nothing to do with the minister. But Simon Bridges says it illustrates the government's incompetence as it scatters promises that it'd make quick work of the review.
The Prime Minister said to New Zealanders, don't judge me on the actual decision, judge me on the way we fix it. Well, I think New Zealanders will be judging her right now.
The National Party leader, Simon Bridges. Several $1 million will be pumped into Auckland and Whangarei after they were awarded the rights to host the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2021. New Zealand won the rights to stage the 9th edition of the tournament, heading off Australia in a vote in Dublin this morning. It'll be the first time the Women's World Cup has been in the Southern Hemisphere and will run for 6 weeks in July and August. The Whangarei Mayor, Cheryl Mai, says the council is investing more than $3 million into the tournament.
A lot of that is work that's already planned, things like buying a backup generator and a big screen and a stadium sound system. So they're the types of things that they're an investment and legacy things that will be in place for future bids for other events.
Cheryl Mai. Whangarei will host 5 games. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport. Tana Umanga wasn't surprised to be asked to take a diminished role at the Blues after another tough season of Super Rugby. Umanga has been demoted from head coach to assistant, with another former All Black, Leon McDonald, taking over as head coach. Umanga has accepted a role as defence coach despite initially extending his contract as head coach to the end of next season. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has heaped praise on Aaron Smith, who's set to become New Zealand's most capped halfback. Hansen has made just one injury-enforced change to the side for Sunday's test against Ireland in Dublin, with Ryan Crotty at second 5 for Sonny Bill Williams, who hurt his shoulder in last week's win over England. Smith starts in what will be his 82nd test, surpassing Justin Marshall for the record. Hansen says Smith has revolutionised the halfback role.
He's a really passionate man and he has a love for the game, and he's done a marvellous job speeding up our delivery of our ball and allowing us to play at a speed that has been uncomfortable for other teams at times.
Steve Hansen. The Black Ferns captain, Fia O'Ofaumasili, says hosting the Women's World Cup is a huge boon for women's rugby, but it won't be enough to keep her playing. New Zealand has beaten Australia to host the 2021 tournament. Faumasili, who's 38, says she'll be 40 and retired when the tournament is played. And world men's tennis number 1, Novak Djokovic, is the first player to qualify for the semi-finals at the ATP World Finals in London. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our changing world investigates the health of older drivers. Is it better for you to stay behind the wheel or take the bus? Or maybe just walk? We have a window on the world of journalism in the United States under attack from tech companies, as well as Donald Trump, and this week's cultural ambassador Charlotte Wilson on what's been rocking her classical world. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine, however 1 or 2 light showers possible. Waikato to Whanganui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Cloudy periods, isolated afternoon and evening showers inland. Manawatu to Wellington, mainly fine, areas of cloud, morning and night. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Bulla and Westland fine, a few showers tomorrow, turning to rain in Westland in the afternoon. Canterbury and Otago fine apart from areas of morning and evening low cloud, rain spreading north tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, patchy drizzle in Fiordland, turning to rain this evening, rain spreading to Southland tomorrow morning with heavy falls possible, rain then easing to showers in the evening. And for the Chatham Islands, mainly fine. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
And I'm Lisa Owen. The success of the manned re-entry of the Pike River mine could hinge on whether police choose to go underground or not. Minister Andrew Little announced yesterday a plan to re-enter the drift nearly 8 years after the first of several explosions that killed 29 men. The plan relies heavily on the involvement of police to collect and secure material that could be used in evidence. But police told Checkpoint that they haven't decided yet what role they will have. They told Checkpoint they will not be attending a training exercise in the Otago gold mine scheduled for later this month. So who else could perform the crucial forensic role if police decide not to go underground? ESR today confirmed to Checkpoint it won't make personnel available for underground duties at Pike River. I asked Andrew Little where this leaves his re-entry plan.
It leaves us with still a job to do, which is to, having ascertained the safest way to enter the drift and whether or not it could be done safely, and therefore the safest way to do it. We're at that point where that decision can be made, and now has been made with the additional resources attached to it. The police have been involved in planning and doing their part of it since the middle of the year. They are yet to make their decisions about whether they will directly send people underground or whether they will train up those who do go underground and what they need to do to preserve the scene, capture evidence, do whatever. But look, the police have continued to be involved, including sending 5 or 6 officers for training just in the last few weeks on mine safety and accessing the mine and so on. They will make their decision in due course, but the operation of recovering the drift has to continue regardless.
Yeah, but the advice given to you in that 66-odd page report continually emphasises the fact that the police involvement in the collection of forensic evidence and going down into the mine is a crucial aspect for the outcome of this project, and the priorities are gathering evidence for what caused this and scene examination and recovery of human remains if possible. Who's your plan B if the police are not going to do that?
Well, the police will be involved regardless. If there is recovery of human remains, they have to be involved. They have to be involved for the purposes of the coroner.
But not underground though, Mr Little. They have not made a decision on whether they will enter the mine. So who will physically collect that evidence if the police will not do it for you?
Well, if I could just finish answering that question. The police will be involved regardless because they have to be, because if there are human remains, they need to act on behalf of the coroner. They also are the agency that does the disaster victim identification. So they will be involved regardless. They have yet to make a decision about whether they will have officers physically underground. But that cannot and should not and could not stop the project of recovering that drift so that we can, through the agency, do our job of whether it is finding remains, but equally importantly, establishing to a better degree the causes or most likely causes of the explosion on the 19th of November 2010. The police are involved, they've got to make their decisions, but this project has to proceed. That is the commitment we've made. We've examined the safety of it. We have a plan that is safe and workable, and we're going to continue on that plan.
If the police do not want to go into the drift, who is going to collect this evidence? Who is plan B?
Well, there doesn't need to be a plan B. It'll be those who do
Why
go
not?
underground to recover the drift. The plan is that once they get past the 170-metre stopping, then they will recover it on a kind of 40-metre by 40-metre basis. They will be trained in how to what to look out for, what to stake out. If they're able
so miners will collect the evidence
with intrinsically safe gear, then they will do that, and they will work with the police externally on an external basis to make sure that evidence is recovered.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but you're saying that miners will collect the evidence if the police decline to go into the drift?
Well, those who are trained and technically proficient to be underground, some of those will be those with trained miners and trained mining experience. Others will be specialists of another sort. I mean, in terms
but this is potentially evidence in a court case. This is a crime scene. This, whatever is gathered, may end up in court. It needs to be impeccable, the collection of this. So, are you suggesting that miners would be trained to gather forensic evidence that the police would normally manage?
I think we've got to be careful we don't get ahead of ourselves. I know you're focused on the police haven't yet made a decision. They will make a decision, and that doesn't have to be for some months yet.
Are you confident for some reason that they will be saying yes?
Look, no, but I've got to stay absolutely independent of the police. Or probably, to put it better, the police have to stay absolutely independent of me as a minister and of the agency. The police have got to maintain and assert their independence. They know what they're dealing with because they know that this is potentially a scene where there is an ongoing criminal investigation that might yield useful information. They know that. They will conduct their investigation and their inquiry or reopen the file that they closed in 2013 in the way that they regard best. But we have a project to do, which is to recover the drift, get what information we can, and most importantly, establish from the agencies and the government's point of view to a better degree what the likely causes were of the 2010 explosion.
But here's the thing, Minister, you can't complete that mission unless you have someone adequately trained to do the exhibit gathering, to do the evidence gathering, and as I understand it, ESR, the board of ESR has decided it will not make any personnel available to you for underground duties at Pike River. I'm just reading a statement they've released to us. It says they've formally agreed with police not to participate in scene recovery within the Pike River mine. So they don't want to go underground either to help with evidence collection. And you don't know yet whether the police will. And the police have told us that they are not participating in the training exercise, which is scheduled for, I think it is the 26th of this month. So how can you meet the schedule you've set out for a start?
They were involved in the training exercise just in the last couple of weeks. So, look, they have been involved and they'll continue to be involved. There's a detective senior sergeant who has been involved since June. So
I do understand that, Minister, but your schedule, the schedule released yesterday says that on the 26th of November, that is when 20 police staff are supposed to join others at the Oceana Gold Mine in Otago to do training. And they've told us they're not going to participate in that.
Okay, well, they may well not do, and but that doesn't mean they're not doing other work and other training. As I say, they were involved in a training exercises recently. In fact, they all got their inductions for the Pike River mine site just in the last couple of weeks. So I'm not quite sure where you're getting to. We've gone through the exercise throughout the course of this year of ascertaining whether or not safe entry is possible, and if so, what the safest way of doing that is. We've got that. We've got extra resources to make sure that that can happen. That's the critical decision that I was required to make. Now we put the program together. The police have been involved because they have a file that remains open and an investigation that remains incomplete. How they go about their investigation, what they do, that's a matter for them. It has to be for them. I can't direct them. I'm not going to direct them. I'm not going to, try some way to compel them. But what I am going to do is back the agency to do and follow through on the commitment we've made, which is to recover that drift, find what we can, find any remains, and find out more likely what the causes of the 2010 explosion were. That's the commitment we've made to the families.
Okay. And that's what I'm getting at, Minister. You have a plan here to enter the drift. The police have not committed to go underground to collect the evidence, which is a crucial part of this operation, and the integrity of that evidence collection needs to be maintained, surely. The police have not said yet whether they will go underground. ESR has ruled out going underground. I'm asking you what you plan to do if the police are not involved, and I'm not sure what you plan to do if the police will not go underground. Can you answer that for me?
Well, no, because the police have to make a decision yet. And I'm not going to, the agency is not going to...
So you're adopting a wait-and-see attitude?
On the basis of what the police, have said that they so far haven't made a decision. They haven't said no, they're not going underground. They said they haven't made a decision at this point. But we have a commitment to recover the drift for the reasons I've outlined.
And that, of course, is Andrew Little, the Minister who's in charge of the Pike River recovery operation. The death toll from California's wildfires is continuing to rise, with nearly 60 people now known to have died. It may take weeks to put out the blazes, and many people are making a painful return to homes which have been completely destroyed. The BBC's Dan Johnson is in California.
A week ago, this was the centre of a vibrant town. Now, it is drained of colour and devoid of life. And it's people like Bill who gave this place its character.
This is the first time you've seen your house, Bill?
First time.
There's not a lot left.
This is the porch, this is the living room. This was my bedroom, that was her bedroom. Back there's the kitchen. It's scorched earth, it's flat, it's gone. It's flat, it's cleared. How do you deal with this? How do you deal with it? Man.
Someone's dogs.
Oh, I picked up one dog and I gave it to a guy in a truck.
Bill managed to save some pets as he faced the flames driving to safety.
Come on, people.
Tires popping, cars are burning.
He picked up a neighbour and headed right into the firestorm.
When is it? Oh, we're moving.
He was the last person from his street to make it out of paradise alive.
Yes, people. It is blowing, it is hot.
What happens next? What do you do?
Rebuild, restart, start life again. I'm alive. I got the clothes on my back. I have my family. I have my friends. I got a lot of people.
Can paradise be rebuilt?
It can be rebuilt. They get to start brand new. 95% gone. It's pretty much a slate board, right? Start over again. These are the people who didn't make it out.
But it's impossible to grasp the scale of loss. Not just individual lives and family homes, but the shared experiences of a community, where they prayed, where they shopped, where they settled to retire. All of it smothered, ruined, dead.
Dan Johnson in the devastated Californian town of Paradise. Back home, the New Zealand Music Awards are about to kick off in Auckland. 4 bands are nominated for 4 awards each tonight: 660, Alien Weaponry, Unknown Mortal Orchestra and Drax Project. To give us a taste of what is happening this evening, RNZ Music's Alex Bean is live at the Spark Arena via the live view. What just happened, Alex? You seem to be diving out of shot for a second there.
Somebody walked across my shot. Kia ora, Lisa. I'm
Kia ora.
at the red carpet event prior to the New Zealand Music Awards. And red carpet affairs are a bit of a misnomer in New Zealand, to be honest. Generally, the red carpet is kind of a dinky affair. And indeed, this one hasn't kicked off. There's way more media here than musicians about to arrive. There's way more media here than there are punters that have come along to see their favourite singers and songwriters, because that's another thing about New Zealand, isn't it? You know, singers and songwriters are beloved, but they're not exactly famous. You're not a celebrity in New Zealand unless you're an All Black, I don't think.
Oh, have you spotted anyone on the red carpet that you can tell us about?
Literally nobody, Lisa. Whether the red carpet is running late or whether the red carpet is just suffering from a lack of people. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm sure people will arrive. Look, there's a great show to look forward to tonight. There's going to be performances from Alien Weaponry to kick things off. We'll be seeing Drax Project, who have had a huge year internationally. Robinson. One of the performances that I'm looking forward to the most tonight is going to close out the Music Awards. It's going to be Shea Fu and the Crates performing Air 2, the classic song by Upper Hut Posse, who are going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame tonight, I think, given the Legacy Award, and so deserved also. Upper Hut Posse are going to be joining me on the RNZ Music Mixtape this Saturday for some amazing stories to go and relive some of their triumph days.
We should tell people that you're looking awfully slick there with your dark glasses on the red carpet. And who's your pick? Who's your pick for the winners?
Look, I really want Alien Weaponry to have a good year. I'm really hoping that they will. I'm sure that Marlon Williams will come away with 1 or 2. You'd expect a huge band like 660 to pick up a couple as well. They've done some incredible numbers this year. It's a funny thing because the music industry is changing, and a lot of people would maybe think that awards, people have said that the Grammys are out of date, that the Oscars are out of date. The New Zealand Music Awards have changed quite a bit over the last few years. They used to be quite predictable. You used to know who was going to win, but these days more and more independent and smaller artists are making the finals, which keeps it really vibrant and alive.
Alex, I see you've got a note written on the palm of your hand. Is that to pick up the onions and sausages from Bunnings on the way home, or is it something more important?
No, that's a tattoo, Lisa.
Oh,
it says this too shall pass.
Go.
It's to remind me that everything in life changes, and I shouldn't hold on to anything too tight.
Awesome. I hope you have a great night tonight, Alex. Nice to talk to you. Alex there, live at the Music Awards, which kicks off at about 7:30 this evening. He's keeping a watch out for the famous people, should they arrive anytime soon. Who would have thought that a simple bus stop could have escalated into a months-long row in which accusations of betrayal have been hurled by angry retirees, culminating in a dramatic meeting between more than 100 residents of a Christchurch retirement village and the regional council. The stoush began when it became clear to residents earlier this year that they would lose their local bus stop due to roading changes on nearby QE2 Drive. The Diana Isaac Retirement Village protested in force, and the council proposed an alternative that would still give residents who can no longer drive a lifeline to the outside world. But now the new proposal has also been scrapped. And as video journalist Logan Church found out, some residents are at a loss as to what to do now.
Without transport it'll be rough when the wheels have fallen off. Growing old is tough enough without this added burden.
That's a choir of fed-up residents at the Diana Isaac Retirement Village. The man behind the music, 77-year-old Mari Lennox, has rewritten the words to the children's classic, The Wheels on the Bus, to something more pointed towards the Canterbury Regional Council.
My wife and I were walking back over the townhouse and she said, why don't we use the wheels on the bus? Right. And that went down very well, and so I sat down and wrote it out.
Oh, how greatly we'll rejoice if they hear our cry.
It all started in March, when 3 busloads of angry retirees turned up on the Regional Council's doorstep demanding their bus route remain or a better alternative be found. The next nearest stop is about 1 kilometre away, and that's a very long way if you use a walker or mobility scooter. The council did find an alternative, rerouting the nearby 44 service, but after consulting property owners around the village and receiving just over 100 submissions against the proposal, they've dropped it. But Murray says that still doesn't solve the problem.
Well, it would be nice to have some form of transport that was accessible. That's basically what we're asking for.
And that leads us to yesterday's meeting, where the Regional Council fronted up at the village to explain what's happened.
And so we're left with the decision that we can't extend the 44 in the way we intended. So what we're thinking about now is what other options have we got? How can we provide public transport connectivity to the village, given that the constraints we have around the orbiter and the community not wanting large buses and practically large buses through that neighbourhood aren't going to work.
That's Stuart Gibbon, the council's public transport senior manager. The council's besieged on all sides on this one. These residents want public transport, while those living outside the village don't want more buses. They have, technically, followed the proper process to the letter. Stuart Gibbon told the meeting new options could be to construct a new bus turnaround for another bus, or some other more flexible transport service. One resident especially worried about not having a bus is 80-year-old Gilda Harding.
I only have my licence for 2 years now. When I lose it, it will make a huge difference.
Ryman Healthcare, who owns the village, is equally unimpressed. In a statement, it says the council promised to bend over backwards to find a solution, but it hasn't. And Ryman says it will work constructively with it to try and find alternatives, but the bottom line is the council has cut a bus service to 900 people. And Gilda says that's not good enough.
One of the advantages of coming into Diana Isaac was the fact that there was a bus route. And I do feel that ECAN has a legal obligation to provide transport for us, especially retirement villages, because people have lack of mobility.
The wheels of the bus go round and round, and we will miss this song.
That was Logan Church reporting there, and a full version of the new and improved Wheels on the Bus with the new lyrics can be found on our website. Time for some of your feedback now. Let's go to the story about the sausage sizzles at Bunnings and this idea that you should place the onions under the sausage, otherwise it could be a potential OSH hazard, a slipping hazard. This person says, I would have thought that slicing the onions would be more dangerous, or dare I say it, eating them. And this entrepreneurial individual says, I'm creating a sunion, I think is how they would say it, like sizzlers that have cheese sunions, are sausages with onions already built in them. So Bunnings can sizzle safely and satisfy the demand. Go me, they say. I've always wished that I could have onions below the sausage, this person says, instead of them asking me afterwards whether I want onions. So go the new rules. I would have struggled to keep the onions within the bread. And this one, read the sausage sizzle. Perhaps sausages will slide off if they are placed on top of the onions, and then what? And anyway, what about the sauce? Isn't the sauce more of a hazard? It's a hazard for dripping on your clothes. It's a hazard for tripping and slipping. Maybe the sauce has got to go too. On a more serious topic, we interviewed Marion Curtin earlier in the show. Her son Richard was killed in the Pike River disaster. She doesn't want the re-entry to go ahead. Anna has sent us this email. She says, while I respect Marion Curtin's view regarding her son Richard's remains, I would like to make the following points, says Anna. The majority of families want their loved ones' remains returned. There are many West Coasters who did not lose family members who also want the recovery to go ahead. Mining, she says, is the lifeblood of many West Coast families whose family members have been miners for generations. If lessons can be learnt from this terrible tragedy that prevents deaths in future, that must be a good thing. As for the cost, look, she says, at the cost of the flag referendum. She says, I know that's a bit flippant, but I think this is a modest sum of money. And what about culpability? Thank you, Anna, for your email, and thank you all for listening. That is Checkpoint for this evening. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A Christchurch lawyer blames industrial action by court staff for putting people in danger after an attempt to attack her defendant in court today. The police are looking for a truck driver who drove off after catching power lines that fell and trapped 2 adults and a baby in a car. New Zealand will get better access to Singapore under an upgraded free trade deal. And the death toll from the California wildfires has risen to 58. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Genetic modification in agriculture has long been a fighting issue. But some of our top scientists argue it's time to consider GM again.
We have such big challenges ahead of us, we can't afford not to have the conversation.
But could it harm the economy, and is it safe? This week on Insight, Charlie Drever investigates if there's a future for genetic modification in New Zealand agriculture. Just after